Habitación iluminada is about that moment in a family when responsibility shifts between parents and children, and the children have to start taking care of their parents. In what it's like to grow old, we're told always that old age is going to be miserable and decrepit and sad, but it seemed to me that losing your mind, being able to imagine things and see things and hear things that aren't there, could be quite fun. Two characters, Eloise, she's in her 40s, very successful, decided not to have children, she runs a hedge fund. Because her brother has gone off to the other end of the world, suddenly she has to take care of her elderly parent, and Joan is losing her mind, but having the time of her life. You know, she was a woman who always sacrificed her own self to the needs of others. Physical disability has now stopped her doing the things that gave her pleasure, like playing the piano. But because in her head she can hallucinate things as though they're really there. She can play the piano again. She can revisit mistakes that she made. She can lose herself in stories. And I had a great moment. I'd spent a lot of time in nursing homes when I was researching it. And I was at a nursing home in Cape Town, and I met a wonderful woman in her 90s. She was in a slightly different reality from mine, but we could still have a conversation. And I told her the whole story of the book. And I said, you know, losing your mind can obviously be terrifying and sad, but maybe it could be a gripping adventure, maybe it could be fun. And she leaned across the plastic tablecloth and she took my hand and she said, "It is." And that's when I thought, okay, great, I'm onto something. This is a story that needs to be told. The way that Joan's dementia works is she's followed by a pair of piano pedals. She was a concert pianist. She always loved to play. And when she touches these pedals, she's able to change her reality and go to different places. And you know, I think dementia affects different people in different ways. I met one man who is always followed by a 6-foot-tall rat who tells him what to do. Another woman whose, whatever room she's in, it's full of furniture, but ugly furniture from her past that she hated. And so in Joan's case, it's a pair of piano pedals. But she doesn't tell anyone, except for one 10-year-old boy who becomes her confidant.
And she also brings opportunity to her daughter to revisit her past.
Yes, I mean, I think, you know, the relationship between a mother and her eldest daughter is often a complicated one. And in Joan and Eloise's case, they love each other deeply, but they don't always understand each other. They're quite different people. Eloise is also in the middle of her own drama. You know, while her mother's losing her mind and having all these adventures, Eloise has taken a big gamble on the stock market, starting to go wrong. She's in a very tense moment in her own life. And so there's a sadness because her mother, she doesn't tell her mother her problems, her mother doesn't tell her her problems. They don't really ever connect and understand. It's only the reader who sees both these women's experiences and hopefully is able to sympathize with both of them.
So why did you say that this is your first grown-up book?
It was the first book that I wrote without caring about other people. I didn't sign a contract, I didn't take any money in advance, I did it on my own. Because it mattered to me to rediscover a certain joy in telling a story that somehow I seem to have lost in my middle 20s. So I went off, it was a solitary journey to find an important part of myself.
And why you wanted your book to talk about the South African War?
Well, my great-grandmother, I mean, a lot of people say that I'm English, but I'm not. I'm South African. I just went to school in the UK. And my great-grandmother was interned by the British in a concentration camp in the Anglo-Boer War. I wanted to explore that. And so at the beginning of the novel, Eloise is putting her mother into a nursing home. She feels very bad about it, so she takes her on holiday to this dusty town in South Africa called Bloemfontein in search of their family's past. So in a way it became a search of my family's past too.
And how do you think realism can or should take real stories into fiction?
Yeah. Well, I think that fiction, although it's made up, should contain truth. And in some ways, the telling of stories can allow the telling of very powerful truth. So for me, the books I write, there are historical events and many things that are grounded in the real world. And for me, it's important that those are accurate. And then you breathe this sort of creativity of imagination on top of them, and these characters come to life who, you know, didn't exist. They're people in a story, but hopefully there's something truthful about them and about their experience. There is no one real reality. You know, Eloise's experience is hers and Joan's is hers. Eloise can't see the things that Joan can see. But both of these women, their own experience, have equal value. And I think that's true of all of us. What's happening in each individual's head is just as valid as anyone else's. And so sometimes the search for an objective reality, exactly what really happened, is not useful either in life or in stories.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting that you picked that, because really that was one of the first ideas of the novel when it started to come to me. I'd already been thinking about an English family who built a very grand house in the late 19th century. And then I was reading an essay by E.M. Forster who talks about his childhood house when he was a boy. It was in the countryside. Then as an adult, slowly motorways and service stations started to creep over the green, and finally his house was in the suburbs. And I thought, maybe I'll take this house that I've already imagined and put it 100 years later, when it's a nursing home, not a mansion any longer, and it's covered in beige paint with plastic exit signs. And to me there's something very moving about the way that people sometimes develop with no nostalgia for the past. You know, you knock down a building that human dramas played out in over centuries, and suddenly it's a shopping mall, and there's no trace of anything that went before. And I find that very sad, and I think that it's one of the duties of a writer to help people think about these things in slightly different ways.
Mm-hmm. Because to Joanne happened that she started to pray the moment she arrived where her ancestors lived.
Yeah. Well, she prays a lot in the novel. It's an interesting book because Joan prays, and her prayers are answered in interesting ways. You can read it as an atheist reader. You can see that there are coincidences and things just happen. If you believe in God, you can see heavenly powers at work. There are multiple interpretations, I think, of that part of the book. But for Joan, she's a very spiritual person. And yeah, and towards the end of her life, she becomes maybe even more so. This homogenization of the modern world, where everything starts to look the same. You know, one of the things I've loved about Barcelona is I've eaten food here that you can only eat in Barcelona. But in many world cities, the food is the same. Every Zara store looks the same. Every service station looks the same. This homogenization of architecture and buildings where places lose their individuality and their distinctness, I think is really sad. And I think we lose a lot by doing that.
That's all.
Thank you.
Thanks
Great
to you.
questions.
Thanks to you.